everybody, and welcome to my sewing room. If you haven't been here before, my name is Rosemary, and I do a whole lot of different kinds of sewing and crafting on this channel. If you have been here before, you'll notice that my room has changed a little bit. I moved into a bigger room so that I have more room to spread out and make it a little bit easier to do my videotaping. Today, I thought it would be fun to make a little boy's shirt. If you don't know how to sew, hopefully you'll learn some things about sewing. And if you do, I have some techniques that I'd like to share with you. So maybe that'll help a little bit for you learning some new things. I have been sewing since I was probably 11 years old. My mother and grandmother taught me how to sew. I come from a big family. My grandmother had 6 kids. My mom had 9. And just about everything that we wore and my grandmothers and my aunts and uncles and everybody wore was homemade. So we did a lot of sewing, and I started sewing very, very young. So a lot of the things I learned from my mother, but I also wanted to mention, I worked 14 years at a store in California called Sew Pros, and one of my friends there, Peggy, hi Peggy, she just has taught me so many things that I just didn't pick up from my mother and grandmother about techniques on how to turn a collar, on how to fit a sleeve, just a lot of different things. So I want to pass that on to you. And so I think maybe we should go ahead and get started. This is a pattern that I purchased. It's a Buttrick pattern. It's just a cute little boy's shirt that's not too complicated. I bought this one as well. This one's really cute. It's from McCall's, and it's got a pants, shirt, vest, and a really nice dress shirt. So if you want to make a dress shirt, this is a nice pattern for that for a little boy. But we're going to kind of keep it simple today and just make a little short sleeve shirt. So I think we're going to go ahead and go with this pattern. You're going to need some cute fabric. This is a one-directional fabric, so we're going to have to be very careful about the direction that we cut it out. This one here goes all different ways. I honestly don't know. It's like a little dog pattern that's from the Disney Channel, so that one's really cute. You're also going to need some good interfacing, iron-on interfacing that we're going to use. As I mentioned before, I've been sewing as far back as I can remember, and I can remember the days when my mother used to use old sheets and cut them up to use them for interfacing just to have enough money to go around to make our clothes. But interfacing is really inexpensive, and it's a good thing for you to purchase to go with your garments. It'll make them look a lot nicer and professional when you're finished. So make sure that you get some interfacing. You also need some really sharp pins. You don't want to be cheap. Dollar store pins are not going to do the job. You want some really good pins, and you want a really good pair of sharp scissors. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go over to my cutting table. We're going to lay this out, and we're going to cut it out. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so this pattern, this is the directions in the pattern, and it's showing you to open it up so you have your selvages open and laying it like this. And the reason why it's doing that is if you look at this one here, this little shirt here has got a border print on it. And it's also a one direction, kind of like what we're doing, but this one is a border. So that's the reason why it's doing that. So we don't need to pay any attention to that. So don't get confused by that. We're going to move down this way. This is the one that we're going to use. And you see here that the shirt is going the same direction the way it's laid. So that should work. That layout should work pretty good for a one-directional fabric, except for the pocket is turned the wrong way, but I'm not going to worry about that because I don't think we're going to put a pocket on this. This is for a 3-year-old, and he doesn't need a pocket. So we're going to lay it out like this. You want to make sure that you're going in the right direction. I have to tell you that I have done it. I've cut things out and sewn them together and realized, uh-oh, all of my lions are upside down. So you don't want to do that. So we're going to lay it out like this. And I'm going to show you how to put it down and pin it. So I got it all pinned down so it looks pretty good. I have to tell you that I'm making this for a little boy who's about 3 years old. And I measured him and went by the measurements that's on the back of my pattern back here to figure out exactly how big it should be. And I'm actually going to cut out a size 5. And you will discover as you sew that a lot of times your patterns are going to be a lot bigger size than what you are. If you, like for instance, wear a size 10 dress pattern, you may discover you need to cut out like a size 16. So make sure you measure before you cut your good fabric that you've spent a lot of money on to make sure you're cutting out the right size. Another thing is you want to make sure that if you see the little part that has the arrows pointing like this, that means put it on the fold. Make sure you get it on the fold. And on the other part, you have a green line right on your pattern that goes down here. You want to measure from the green line to the selvage. I can't tell you how many times I tried to take a shortcut. I still remember way back in junior high, my home economics teacher made me mad because she made me unpin something and repin it to make sure that I had it on the grain line. It is really important. And this fabric in particular has got stripes on it. So if I cut it crooked, it's going to show when I go to sew it together. But it also hangs a lot better if you keep it on the grain line. So measure from the grain line to your selvage. Make sure you've got it on there straight. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut this out. And then we'll go to the sewing machine. Okay, so I've cut out my shirt patterns. This is the back piece, and this is the front piece. And I went ahead and ironed the interfacing on this front piece right here. And then what happens is this piece lays on the shoulders. We're going to match the shoulders, and we're going to sew a 5/8 inch seam here, and the other piece lays here like this, and then we'll sew 5/8 here, and you'll see that these two pieces kind of overlap each other, and we'll fix that in a minute to show you how that works. Another thing that I've done is I went ahead and I finished up the edge. And you can take it and you can turn it under and do a rolled hem or something like that on it. But it's a lot of work to do, and it doesn't always lay as flat as you like. So sometimes the easiest thing to do is to do a 3-part zigzag on there. And I'll show you what stitch that is on the Brother machine. But it's very easy to do, and it makes a nice finished edge with the interfacing ironed on there and finishes off the edge. So then this is that piece, and with the shoulder seams ironed, sewn, and then if I turn it inside out, you'll see that I pressed open those seams to make them nice and flat. And then this piece goes right here to fold over to create my shirt. And this piece here will get turned under and we'll make a facing all in one step. So that works out really nicely for finishing that. The next step that your pattern's going to tell you to do is to do some stay stitching. And stay stitching is literally just a running stitch that runs all around about 5 inches away, 5/8 of an inch away from the edge. And that's going to keep that curve from stretching because it's on the bias, and what will happen is it'll start to stretch as you're sewing it and it won't lay flat. So you just do a little stay stitching on there, and that'll make it stay the way you want it to. So that piece is pretty much ready to go to put the collar on it. Here's my collar piece that I have, and I'm making 2 of them. So I put the interfacing on the inside of one of them. Here's my interfacing. It's ironed on, and you'll notice that I took and I cut the corners off. And the reason why I did that is sometimes when you stitch straight down this way and then turn and go this way, there's too much bulk in there and it doesn't turn and lay flat the way you'd like it to. So just cutting off that little corner will make a difference in the interfacing. And then on this piece here, I've already sewn that all the way around. And as you go up this way, you want to stop and make 1 stitch in the corner and then pivot and go this way. And the reason why you do that is when you get up to this corner and go to turn it, it'll turn nicer if it's not a direct pivot and turn. That 1 little tiny stitch in the corner will make a whole lot of difference. So I've sewn all the way around here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my thumb inside the 2 layers like this. And then I'm going to lay this part and fold it down over my thumb this way and down over my thumb this way. It's almost like I'm making a fold right there. And see, now I've got a corner, and then I'm going to take it and I'm going to push it through to the other side. And then I'll have a nice flat laying corner. So the next thing I want to do is I want to push out this corner a little bit better. I did a pretty good job of turning it inside out without too much bulk, but I want to push it out just a little bit more. And I know the temptation is to take a pair of scissors and push it up in there and push it out, but these really pointy scissors are going to push a hole in that, and then you're going to be very unhappy. So get yourself something like this. This is a corner turner, and they make them in plastic and they make them in wood. I haven't seen a wood one in a long time. I like this one because it's got measurements on it, but it works really good for pushing corners out. So I'm going to take it and put it up inside here, and I'm just going to push a little bit to make my corners come out nice on both sides. And then I'm going to take my iron and I want to fold this down so that the edge of my seam is right there, and I'm going to press it so I get a nice flat collar piece. And I will eventually, after I get it on the shirt, top stitch really close to the edge here to get a nice finished edge. So this is my original pattern piece that was in the pattern. And if I lay it on here, there are some, turn it the right way, there are some triangles here that I probably should have cut out. I have a real bad habit of cutting off those little triangle markers. But I need to mark this spot right here. That's how far in it goes. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to just cut a slash right there. And then I'm going to do it over here on this side. Same thing. I'm just going to cut a little cut right there. And you'll see that right there is where it'll turn up. And I'm going to turn it under. And the directions show this to you in pictures, so you'll know that's what you're supposed to do. But I can remember I struggled for many years when my kids were little, trying to figure out how to get a collar to lay flat and go on there right. And this is one of the tricks, is to take the time it takes to just turn that little piece up right there. And then we're going to take our shirt and put it right here like this. Let me see if I can get this so you can see it. Here's our shirt like this. And then the collar, we want to mark the center of the collar right like this. Fold it in half, mark the center. And put this right here like that. And you don't want to pin through all the layers. You want to take this front part out of the way. And here. And then we're going to work this around like this. So that the edge comes up to the edge of your collar right here. And right here. And when we get around to this part here where it's not turned under, we're going to put the pin on the top so it goes through both. And then this entire piece here folds over and goes here. I'm going to take the pin out from underneath there and I'm going to put it right there. And then I'm going to work this around. And because it's curved, it's not going to lay flat exactly. We're going to work it around till it lays the way we want it to, like that. So then when we go to sew it, we're going to sew it with it folded over, and we're going to go all the way down. And then when we get to this part here where the collar's turned up, we're going to stop sewing, cut the thread, come back over here, start sewing again, sew across here, and then we're going to do it the other way, exactly the same way. So I'm going to take this This is probably the most complicated part of making a little shirt, is getting that collar in exactly the way you want it to be. So we got the collar pinned. We're going to take this facing side and fold it over like this. And I usually try and make the fold over match the shoulder seam. So the shoulder seam and the fold over come together right there. And if you have some problems getting this to curve around and make it straight, don't be afraid to make a little slit with your very sharp scissors, but don't cut further down than where the seam is. If you go further than the seam, you're going to be sorry. So we only want to go to where that stay stitching is, and then we're going to stitch it all the way across, making sure that you leave this other side of the collar open. You're going to sew here, stop, move this out of the way, come back over here and sew here. And I'll show you what that looks like when it's all done. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've sewn that seam going all the way down to here. And then I took the little tiny edge and turned it down a little bit, because when I flip it, I want it to be turned under so I can sew it. Then I stopped right here, pushed this out of the way, and started sewing here, and sewed it all the way to here, stopped, cut my thread, put my presser foot back on, and started here, and then started sewing all the way to the edge here. I have to tell you that the most frustrating part of doing one of these little shirts is the last part of the collar right here. If you miss that corner, it's not going to be connected right here, and you're not going to be happy. So just make sure that you put a pin in there and hold it in there really good so it gets to the edge of that collar. And then you want to clip these because it's a very curved neckline. Just take your sharp scissors and cut clips all the way to your stitching so that it curves the way you want it to. And then when you go to turn this inside out, you can do the same thing. Put your thumb in there, turn the seam allowance down and out of the way, hold on to it, and flip it. So you get a nice corner like that. We want a nice flat corner. And I'm going to just push it out a little bit more with my corner turner. I'm going to turn this one. I'm going to fold it down and flip it. And there is my collar on there. And then I want to make sure that I clip it right here near where this seam comes together so that I can push that seam allowance into the collar and then pin it. So I'm going to take a pin and pin it right here. Push that up inside of there, hopefully. Going to pin that right here like this, and then I'm going to hand stitch that down all the way around so it's nice and neat with all the seam allowances pushed into the collar. And this seam allowance here, the top of the facing, should come just about to where the shoulder seams are, so I can stitch that down with some hand sewing as well. I remember when I was really young, I did not like doing hand stitching, and I kind of would do it fast and sloppily, and it didn't hold it together nicely. So now I make sure that I do my hand stitching nice and neat, go all the way up and around the inside of the collar, and you'll be much happier with what you end up with when you're all done. So there's my collar, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my sleeves in. And I mentioned it a little bit ago about when you make a boy's shirt, you don't want little ruffles. You don't want to run a gathering stitch and gather it to fit in that spot. And you also, here, let me flatten it out a little bit here. You'll see that this curves around like this. And there is no way that this sleeve, if you put it on here like this with the center and move it around, is going to fit in there, right? And we've all done that. We put the sleeve there and realized there was no way that that pattern, when you go to pin it, was going to fit. It's going to be too long right here, right? So what do? You cut it off? No, don't do that, because if you do that, it's not going to fit and it's not going to move well. Or you run a stitch here and you pull on it a little bit and gather it up a little bit, and then you run the chance of it looking like a little girl's puffy sleeve, which we don't want on a little boy's shirt. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to try and show you a technique that I learned years ago. I mentioned it earlier. My friend Peggy taught me a whole lot, and this is one of the things she taught me on how to make a sleeve fit into the armhole socket. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so I'm at my sewing machine and I have my sleeve under my presser foot. And you can do this without any thread in the machine at all, but my machine's got one of those sensors in it that won't sew unless there's thread in it. So I'm going to go ahead and do it with thread in it, and I'm going to change my stitch length as high as it'll go, which is 5 millimeters, and I'm just doing a regular center needle straight stitch. I'm going to go ahead and put my foot down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put my finger back here behind the foot, so it's kind of resting on the back of the foot, and as I start to sew, the fabric will actually start to bunch up behind the foot. And it's actually kind of making little pleats as it's sewing this. And it's, as I get closer to the end of the sleeve, it becomes quite a bulk to hold onto. But I'm just going to keep my finger pushed right back there. And then when I get to the end, hit my scissor cutter and lift it up. You will see that this sleeve looks like it's gathered, but it's not. It's just got a whole bunch of little tiny pleats in it. And then when I go to put it on my sleeve opening, let's get this thread out of the way, I can lay it right sides together with the center piece right on the shoulder seam and the end piece right on the end piece here. And I'm going to stop the film for just a minute so I can go ahead and pin this all together. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do that is completely against the rules is I'm actually going to put my sleeve against my feed dogs and my shirt opening on the top. They always tell you to put the sleeve on the top and ease it in there, but the feed dogs will actually help to ease this sleeve in. So I've got it pinned there, and I'm just going to start sewing. And I don't know about you, but on my sewing machine, I can generally sew over a pin. I just have to be very careful as I'm going to make sure my needle doesn't hit that pin. So I did hit a pin right there. I heard it go click, but it was okay. So you can see my sleeve is eased in there. There's no actual puckers or gathers, but it eased in there and it fit. I actually have this end and this end fit in there, and it seems crazy, but it works every time if you just fit it. I'm taking the pins out right now. Okay, so I've come in the other room to my ironing board, and I was perfectly aware that when I was trying to videotape me sewing this sleeve on, it was hard to see with the fabric bunching up. But I want you to see that this came out pretty good. I can see like one place right here where I have a little pucker, but for the most part it came out really nice. And I'm going to lay it on my sewing ham. If you guys don't have a sewing ham, it's a really nice thing to get because it helps when you're trying to iron curves like this to make things fit. So especially if you do like a sleeve that's got some fullness around it, it helps to shape that sleeve. It helps shape a lot of the curves that you're doing. So I'm pressing this all the way around. I've got a little bit of fullness right there, but I can press that out so it looks nice and flat. And this is the part where I feel like it got a little, almost like a little gathering right in here. So I'm going to press this out too. The important part is that the sleeve actually fit in the part that's supposed to be the sleeve hole. And if I was making a man shirt, I probably would have sewed the side seam and the side seam of the sleeve and inserted it in there. It fits in there a little bit better, but sometimes when you're doing little boy shirts, it's really hard to get into that small space. So now that I have the sleeve on there, I'm going to turn it inside out. I'm going to match the underarm seam so it comes together exactly where I want it to be, and I'm going to stitch from that seam out and then from this seam down. And the reason why I do it that way instead of starting at one edge and going all the way down is that it moves sometimes. So I want to make sure I've got this underarm seam coming together exactly where I want it to be. And I've already done it on this side where I sewed it. And then I went ahead and I used that 3-part zigzag to finish the edge. Now, if you have a serger, by all means, do it on the serger. You get such a beautiful edge when you serge it off, and it comes out nice and flat and finished and professional looking. But if you don't, you can use that 3-part zigzag, and it finishes that edge pretty nice. And then you can come back with your scissors. Don't drop them on the floor. You can come back with your scissors, and you can trim the little threads and everything and make it look really nice on the edge. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take this edge of the sleeve, and this sleeve is shaped so that it goes up and then out. And the reason it does that is so that when I go to turn it up to do this sleeve edge, I have a nice turn and it folds over exactly the way I want it to. And of course I'm going to turn the raw edge under like this, and then I'm going to press it and top stitch it. And then I'm going to take the bottom where I've sewn my side seam, and then this part right here on the front, I have sewn my collar down into place, and this part is in place, and I stitched it right here to make that stay. And then this whole thing will just flip around to the right sides together, and I'm going to sew right along here. So that way, when I go to turn this, the whole front of the shirt turns evenly all the way around, and I get a nice finished edge here. And then I can take the whole thing and turn this edge up. And usually all I do is just do a small rolled hem all the way across the bottom of this shirt, because we don't need a great big huge hem. A nice little rolled hem pressed down and then top stitched is going to finish up this shirt. And then I'm going to put the buttons on it, and I'll show it to you all finished. Okay, so here's my little shirts. I've made 2 of them, like I said, because I have 2 great-grandsons, Coda Bear and Matthew. And I'm going to take a picture of them wearing these little shirts, and I'll put it on my Instagram. But you can see that this is probably one of the easiest little things you can make for children. So many times we do the little dresses because they're just fun to do, to make little dresses, but it's also fun to make a little shirt for a little boy. And this one is easy, and you don't have to be a real experienced sewer in order to do it. If you have a sewing machine that does an automatic buttonhole, it makes it so much easier. So I would really recommend that you get one that does step. But I put the hem on the bottom, and I finished it on the inside, so it looks really nice with it folded under. Very easy to do. nice little collar without too complicated. I hope you had fun and that you might have learned a few techniques to make it a little bit easier to make your shirt get finished. I am going to do another software class next week that's just going to really quickly show you a technique that's on the PE Design 11 and make a little girl's dress. So hopefully you'll come back and see me next week and make a comment and let me know what you think about the channel, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.